Now, all of this may give you a big fat Protestant headache. Who's to say what counts as a heresy? And doesn't a Christian have a right to his or her convictions? Maybe we should have no doctrinal standards. Maybe we should just point at the Bible and say that we as a group adhere to whatever is taught in the New Testament. This approach has been tried in the late 18th and 19th centuries in America, and it is what turned American Unitarian Christianity into a non-Christian movement, eventually becoming what we know now as Unitarian Universalism. I call it the free, that is to say, in the old sense of the word, liberal tradition. They actually called some of these churches free churches, like free of creeds, free of merely human authority. This stance was, frankly, an aberration, and it was driven by the early American cultural disdain for authoritarian traditions. It was, in my view, an overreaction to state-controlled churches of Europe, then current. I will deal briefly with this third perspective about H-bombs. First, in my view, this theory is impractical. If your aim is to live in a Christian community, this isn't going to work. With no doctrinal standards, or with only gesturing at the Bible and saying, we all accept that, however understood, what defense do you have when your pastor or your teaching elder stops believing in a personal God? Or what about when he asserts that the only essential message of the Bible is to love your neighbor? How about when your pastor deems that baptism is an outmoded, no longer necessary tradition? These things all actually happen. These are not hypothetical examples. They happened in America in free churches. These free, creedless churches simply chose human autonomy over fidelity to apostolic tradition. My second point about this stance is I think it's hypocritical. Any like-minded religious community, Christian or not, in fact has its own standards about what can be taught therein, even if they pretend not to. Try going into, I know this isn't a Christian example, okay, but try going into a Unitarian Universalist congregation and teaching that wives should submit to their husbands, that any sex outside of heterosexual marriage is a sin, or that George W. Bush was an excellent president. You will soon find yourself unwelcome. Most importantly, this approach goes against apostolic practice. They did not simply accept any teaching or pretend to have no doctrinal standards or opine that it'll all work out if we just let everyone find his own way. To the contrary, they were capable of ferociously opposing some teachings and of ejecting people from membership in a church. And they nagged us to hold tightly to the traditions that they taught us. So this isn't their way.